Hi, I'm Dr. Tyra Seldon, and welcome to this episode of The Write On Show, where we talk about your perspectives on culture, writing, and literature. Today I have a very special show. I wanted to bring together a panel of millennial influencers. And one of the reasons why this show is so important to me is because so often generations don't understand the ones that come before them or the ones that come after them. And by having conversations that allow us to understand who they are, what they do, and why they do it, it is my greatest hope that we'll be bridge builders. So what I'd like for you to do is to introduce yourselves, and in a part of your introduction, share with everyone what you're most passionate about and why. And Elise, I'd like to start with you.
Okay. I have spent a lot of my time recently working as an organizer. I'm also a storyteller. I spent most of my time organizing, working around money and politics issues, kind of a pro-democracy perspective on how we get money out of politics, how we fight voter suppression, those kinds of things, with the idea that if we can kind of tackle the issue of American democracy, right, the rest of our issues will be easier to solve, that we can do that sort of better together. More recently, I've kind of been shifting my focus a little bit, recognizing that that's a pretty uphill battle. So now I'm back in school full time, pursuing a policy studies degree, so that I can kind of work on the legislative side of things.
Okay, excellent.
Awesome. My name is Tony Wilburn. Currently, what I'm really focused on is organizing and directing the culture, especially on the Ball State campus, of African Americans. The reason why I'm very I would definitely say passionate about culture of African Americans is because not a lot of African Americans, especially in our generation, know their culture or feel the need to reach out to their culture. Everybody wants to, when they come to college, they want to get to know themselves. They want to find themselves. So they become very active, hoping that they will find in their activity their culture. And the organization that I have, the United Coalition, wants to do just that and create that template for them to come and understand their own ideologies, understand their culture, and understand their culture, especially within the North American society.
Awesome. My name is Mike Pirtle. What I'm passionate about, in a word, progress.
Okay.
Sort of in an industry, entrepreneurship, really helping people connect with the things that they're passionate about and giving them tools to, create measurable progress. A lot of people have things they want to do, so brand development is my skill set, and I just apply that across different industries to grow businesses and people. So.
Okay, excellent. So here's the question of the hour. You guys ready?
Yes.
Okay, what is a millennial?
Huh?
I didn't see that one on the sheet.
I guess I'll catch the lob.
Yeah.
What is a millennial? Well, I guess in short form, it's really us.
Okay.
It's definitely, I think, the up and coming generation who now maybe we voted 2 or 3 times now, and we have the opportunity to really mold where society is right now. And I think that's why it's a major topic, because people understand where the influence is coming, and the people who have built society as it stands today want to not only kind of have an influence among the upcoming influencers, but I also think that as millennials, it's very much on us to understand that we need to mold ourselves into those influencers.
Okay. You want to add to that?
I would definitely agree with what Mike, is that correct? Mike said, and really kind of push on the fact that I was going to come out, I think millennials ended at 1995. That's Generation Z. But millennials are basically persons who are looked at as the innovators. Kind of, they're very technical in their skills, and they're very fast. Everything that we do now is fast. Our response time is fast. Our intake time is fast. Our output is expected to be fast. So we're just a generation of things that have to happen very immediately, very fast.
Okay. So it's interesting because both of your descriptions were very positive, right? So we have to go there because it's all about changing the narrative. There are some people who associate more negative terms or descriptions to what millennials do. Like I've heard people say they don't have any grit, or they're entitled, or they're spoiled, or they're not ambitious, right? What would you say to people who tend not to understand what your generation is about?
I think that that's the key to it, right? I think it's a lack of understanding, because I think that kind of bridging off what y'all were saying, I think we're engineers, right? I think that we're creating something new, and that people don't understand what that is.
Okay.
That a lot of kind of the accepted wisdom, a lot of the status quo is it's not best practices, right? It's not it's not the highest and best ways that we can function and interact with the world and interact with each other. And our population is growing so quickly globally, problems are arising so quickly, change is happening so quickly on social levels, political levels, climate levels, that we're just not going to accept the accepted wisdom. We're here to find better solutions, and I think that that's threatening. I think that that's challenging to people,
Okay, excellent. Either of you want to add to that?
Yes, I would definitely say that it really says, because I love to use this, from time to time. The good book definitely talked about it in the book of Daniel. It talked about how each generation is stronger than the last generation, yet weaker at the same time.
Okay.
So yes, there are definitely a lot of negatives that are associated with millennials, and some are true.
Okay.
And some can be tested. As I was saying earlier, they were very fast. They're very immediate. But there's a consequence, a negative consequence that comes with that at the same time.
Okay.
Because you're very immediate and you're like this, sometimes you may overlook details.
Okay.
Sometimes you may only go to the superficial amount of information. You see what I'm saying? Instead of going deeper into that information and digesting that information and processing that information, meditating on that information, what would end up happening is you'll just end up regurgitating quick information.
Okay.
And then you'll move on to the next thing, and you have no really area to focus on. So I definitely believe that yes, there are a lot of negatives that come with our generation, but I would like to challenge some of those negatives later on.
Okay. And I appreciate that. That's what this whole show is about. So you talked about expediency and let's say immediate gratification in some instances, because you all literally are the technology generation, right? You're savvy, you've had access. Social media has been around for almost your entire existence, okay? What role do you think social media has played in shaping and informing the way in which your generation sees the world?
This might seem a little bit impactful, but I'm going to explain it. I think it's made our generation a little bit schizophrenic.
Okay, explain.
There was a study done it was done on rats at the time, where it's like if you place a meal in front of this animal at the same time, same location, they would go about their day, exercise, drink, whatever, and then come for their meal at that specified time.
Okay.
But then if you start dropping it in at different locations at different times, now they aren't exercising, they aren't eating, they're just always looking for that next meal. And I think that with social media, because we can pull our phone out of our pocket and access information at any time, we've kind of disconnected from our present reality, and that can make us a little bit shallow in our understanding of that reality.
Okay.
And so I do think that it can cripple you in a way, technology and social media, but at the same time, if you leverage it as a way to project your voice, as long as that voice is based in reason, it can be powerful.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think that also, I think some of the strengths are just access to information and access to different perspectives, and also to community, right? If you're somebody who is growing up and is kind of ideologically isolated in your community, now you can get on, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Tumblr, and build community and learn about yourself, if you're like a young queer person in a rural community, you're not alone anymore in the way that you might have been 15, 20 plus years ago. On the other hand, I think that people's attention is really divided. I think that people tend to hop issue to issue. We get real woke and educated about something for a day. And then it's on to whatever the next headline is tomorrow. When we haven't done anything about this crisis we built about something yesterday.
Right.
And I think that can be really damaging. And I think that is I think that's a criticism that I hear about millennials, and I think that one's pretty accurate, that like we can't stay focused on, we're like rabble-rousing about all these different things, but we can't just like get committed to solving any of these problems that we're talking about.
I think that social media has definitely kind of added to, in some areas, the inability to stay focused on certain issues.
Okay.
You see, because people with anything, you have to educate them about a platform.
Right.
When computers came along, you had to educate the users how to configure and build those computer systems. When cars came along, you had to teach people how to drive cars and be responsible in that driving of cars, and then you had policies and regulations that back that. With social media, it's almost like a free-for-all if you go on Facebook at times. And you know, just to follow what Elise had said, you'll have times where you'll see videos or articles, news articles of controversial things, and now that has enabled you to be more conscious in a way of what the current climate of your environment is. However, most times people, when they internalize that, they want to release that. So you'll see a 15-minute educated status that will take you about 30 minutes to read that have very great points with either applause or dislikes under which, and then that person goes to sleep feeling good, and then the next day they see another problem and do the same thing. And the thing that persons definitely have to learn is that it's okay to take what's in your environment. It's okay to internalize what's in the environment. It's okay to be passionate about that, but don't exert it to the point where you now go to sleep feeling good at night like you did something. In actuality, you did nothing, and you're not adding to change the conditions of the climate. And what's unfortunate about it, this generation has not been taught how to internalize it and now turn it into action. You have only a couple that are internalizing it and now trying to find a way to express it in action.
Action speaks louder than words, but social media has made those words a little bit louder.
But it's so gratifying. It's like I get to write this status and then I get all these likes. I feel good about myself. Oh, I convinced somebody today. I did my part. And like, no, I didn't do anything. Those people already agreed with me. You know.
And this is a great place to take a break. So we will be back continuing our conversation with millennial influencers. Welcome back to the Right On Show, where this episode we have millennial influencers with us. So this next question is for all three of you, but Mike, I'm going to start with you. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about how social media has impacted or influenced this generation, pros and cons. And one of the things that was brought up was this idea that perhaps previous generations didn't do the best job preparing you all for some of the issues that you now face. So my question is, and again, I'd like for all three of you to answer it, do you feel as if, so I'm Generation X, and then the generation before me were the baby boomers, do you feel like, let's say the two generations before you, did an adequate job in preparing you all for some of the challenges that you now face? And I want you all to be honest, this is all about having a conversation and building bridges.
Wow.
That wasn't on the sheet either.
Well, I mean, because it's like, how do you prepare someone for a game that's never been played before? I think that I'm a sports guy, and if you play football and it's your first time seeing like a no huddle offense, can you really blame anyone? You know, it's just like you kind of have to figure it out. And the biggest thing that I would say is that it's not so much about saying, are we prepared or are we unprepared, as much as it's saying, it's not about millennials, it's not about boomers or Gen X or Gen whoever in the world is after us.
So you don't even know.
But it's really, it's about can we call a timeout and get a huddle?
Okay.
You know, because right now I think that a lot of people are trying to figure it out individually, and we have to figure this out collectively.
Okay.
You know, we've got this collective conscious that a lot of people are riding, but I don't think that collective conscious is very well informed.
Okay.
And I will say that I think that millennials could leverage our elders better as far as listening, learning, internalizing, and implementing it into how we're dealing with the challenges that we face today. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that we have been ill prepared. I would just say that it's more so about like taking a second to reevaluate the landscape and then prepare future generations.
Okay.
I would definitely take a different route, a different perspective, because, you know, again, referring back to the good book, it says nothing new is under the sun. You see, so even with time continuously going forward, there are always going to still be elements in society that are consistent. For example, marriage. That's something that, you know, that I'm very passionate about. Marriage, you don't, for this generation, a lot of us didn't grow up in married households. Some of us grew up with our moms or dads shacking up with each other or someone else. Some of us grew up in single parent households. Some of us grew up in with our parents being divorced. Some of us grew up with, if our parents were married, they didn't have the proper marriage. So I would say that the previous generation has kind of failed in making sure that their mistakes don't become our mistakes, and making sure that we have the ability now to become problem solvers and not necessarily problem evolvers, evolving the problem to where it's now past, you know, a certain point. So I definitely think that the previous generation could have better prepared us for their mistakes and to better prepare in getting the next generation to a better place.
Elise?
What a tough question.
You guys can handle it.
Yeah, I guess, you know, I think that I agree with a lot of what Mike said, kind of about like, you know, how do you prepare somebody for the internet, right? Before the internet is a thing, how do you prepare people for it? And I remember when I was in middle school and high school, you know, like MySpace existed, but I wasn't allowed to have one because like people didn't know what that meant. People didn't know what it was and who could reach you there. And, you know, there were all these fears around it. And it's, you know, a meme that I thought was really funny that kind of came out of the election last year was, you know, that when we were kids, our parents were like, stay off the internet, you know, you can't trust anybody there, there's all these strangers, and now it's just like whatever, like fake spam news site is. This fake spam news site says this, so it must be true, and I'm not going to do any more research, and it's like, how far are we fallen? You know, so I think that's an interesting question in terms of kind of like preparation and so I don't know that I really feel like I can speak to kind of the social preparation side of it. What kind of came up for me when you asked that was kind of this world as it is that we've inherited, you know, and I think that is something, you know, every day on the whole, I think the world is a little bit better than it was the day before, but there are certain problems and certain crises that are just getting worse and worse. You know, I think kind of seeing like the deregulation of capitalism, you know, starting like the 70s and 80s is something that like people have been feeling, you know, since then, but I think it's as global populations rise, like we're gonna continue to hit this wall where like capitalism maybe isn't meeting everybody's needs in this like globalized future. I think, you know, we are just now starting to feel the climate effects of environmental problems that were existing in the 60s and 70s. It takes about 40 years for us to feel temperature change because the oceans absorb that heat first. And so it's crazy to me to think like, you know, as we are going to start deregulating environmental things, you know, we're not even experiencing the problems from today right now. They're going to get so much worse, you know? And so this world that we've inherited, this economy that we've inherited, this sort of social structure we've inherited, to me is the thing that's really troubling, because it's not sustainable for the kind of lifestyles that we have, and the sheer number of people there are on this planet.
That's the way. Just to kind of balance it, I would definitely just kind of hearing both of those. It's definitely a thing, because I think that's as far as a society, I would say that the generation before us kind of masked problems rather than fixing them.
Did we?
Why didn't
you solve that?
No, because really,
You could have fixed this.
no, but really, like, how in 2017 are we still dealing with some of the things that Dr. King marched against, like way back in the day? Like, are we really pulling torches back out? Like, you guys just put them in the closet for a little bit. And I'm not saying like I'm not saying you guys as in like as a generation, but just as America and as a society, and even like Cold War, like we're really dealing with this with Russia, you know, like we didn't solve problems. We just said, maybe it'll just go away, and that's what we're doing with global warming as well. And it's one of those things where we can take that as a note moving forward again to all collectively come to the table and say, let's really solve it this time.
Okay.
Let's not hope it, you know.
So I have a follow-up question then. So how do we move from rhetoric to action?
To move from rhetoric to action, that takes a lot of discipline.
Okay, explain.
Because it's easy to think about the problem, and it's easy to visualize the end game.
Okay.
Versus visualizing, okay, this is the first step, this is step number 2, this is step number 3, and going in a chronological order in that way. You have to organize and be able to mobilize and direct if you want action to take place, and systematic action to take place. What people fail to understand is that it is easy. You can come into a completely clean house. It can take you 30 seconds to destroy that clean house. I have a 3-year-old. It can take 30 seconds, if not 15, for her to destroy a room. And I spent 2 hours cleaning that room up. But that's an analogy of how long it's going to now take, because now you're not just battling the environment. You're not just battling global warming. You're not just battling racism. Now you're battling ideology. You're battling mandates in a higher place. You see, and principles in that area. So if people really want to take action, they first have to take discipline and the actions that they have in their everyday lives. You see, and that you have to now become conscious of the things that you're doing on a normal basis. Most people just go through life on autopilot. You know,
even before the action, though, it's about the thought. Before you can be disciplined in your actions, you have to be disciplined in your thought life. And a lot of people, again, the schizophrenia of social has really caused people to be ridiculously undisciplined in their thought life. And so, and that's something that is literally like a me and me thing, you know, and we try to solve so many of our issues as a us against them, or we against they, when our greatest battle is really all internally as like an I thing. So,
Elise, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, there's like a lot of complexity for me kind of with this question around like action, right? And what action means. You know, through my time, you know, working as a community organizer, there, you know, kind of what immediately jumps out is like, okay, well, agitate, educate, organize, like get people upset, you know, teach them the issues and like get them out, you know, in the streets or working social programs or kind of engaging in whatever way feels productive and good and comfortable and fulfilling to individuals. And I believe in that, and I do believe in the power of kind of organizing and direct action, whether that's, you know, like civil disobedience or it's direct services, as being really significant in terms of creating kind of immediate impacts on people's lives and also potentially pressuring policy change. But then the other thing that's coming up for me right now is kind of around that question of policy change, and that I think right now, more than at least any time in the last 100+ years, we are experiencing so much inaction around so many issues because of such harsh bipartisanship, whether that is politically or ideologically, whether it's within kind of the political system or just in our own personal lives, people, and I think this is also kind of maybe a byproduct of social media, that we like don't know enough to really know. We just know, the kind of like clickbait headline amount of information, to get really entrenched in an opinion, and then kind of say like, anybody who believes what I believe is right, anybody who doesn't believe that is wrong, and then people aren't coming to the table. And so I think another piece of translating things into action really has to come from taking the time to educate yourself and to challenge yourself and say, as intractable as this seems, or as wrong as the opposition seems, whether it's on something like that is very complex and like economics, for example, or if it's something that feels very cut and dry and moral, around like human rights and civil rights, like trying to understand where the opposition is coming from, trying to see things from their perspective, and then working to find people who are willing to come to the table with you, because otherwise I'm afraid that we're not going to see a lot of meaningful, lasting change that comes about through the formal structures.
Okay, so great responses, and this led to like another follow-up question for me. As influencers, because each of you are, right? What advice then, or what steps do you see yourselves taking, so we're going to project a little bit into the future, to ensure that those who are younger than you, right, so the next generation, is prepared to basically take the torch and continue the work that you all are doing right now?
Yeah, there's a video online of this like little girl talking to her dad. He's like telling her something. She's like, "Worry about yourself." I don't know if y'all seen that video, but like, I mean, no, really, that's like the greatest encouragement is like, worry about yourself, because if you get so wrapped up into trying to be like a world changer, and you're trying to change stuff that's happening on the other continent, you'll never literally become a person who's big enough and has enough influence to actually affect it. You're just gonna type up a status and go to sleep feeling good about yourself. At this point, now I've got an institute on the West Coast and running several businesses from over here. And I didn't get there by looking at anybody else. It was literally about like, who are you? Who do you want to be? Who do you need to become in order to do these things? Like, I worry about yourself.
Okay, interesting. All right. Wow. Any thoughts?
I would say just how I want to go about influencing the next generation is challenging them. You have to challenge people, and the problem that we face right now is people aren't used to being challenged, and they don't know how to take criticism. So as soon as you challenge something like, you shouldn't do that, I shouldn't do what? When? Well, what do you know about it? And they get upset. But we have to begin to challenge them, challenge their minds, and then begin to push them forward.
I kind of think two things are coming up for me. One is like, when I was a kid, and honestly, if I'm being honest, sometimes now also, like pretty egoistic, right? And I'm like, I am single-handedly gonna save the world, And I remember being a kid, and my mom was like, maybe also if you just like impact a small number of people, like that can have ripple effects. And I was just like, I don't know, I'm gonna save the world. But I'm starting to see that more, and I'm starting to kind of see more how in my life, there have been individuals, and you are among them, right, who have impacted me, and then the people that I've impacted are a part of that wave. And so I think it doesn't have to be something big and grand. It can just be showing up for the people around you, and kind of like looking at the people in your community and asking, how can I support you? What are your goals? What are your needs? What deficiencies are you feeling in school? Or what needs aren't you having met, and how can I support you in that? And kind of to that end, nope, I forget the other thing I was going to say. What a disaster. Oh wow.
That's not good.
Well, the one other thing that I would say is, as far as like worry about yourself, is like, you have to be more informed. You have to be more educated. Like, go read something. Like, this is the Ride On show. There's like, you can try to blame the generation before us, like you guys didn't do anything to prepare us, but there's literally a probably 1 million books out there that you guys have written that none of the millennials have written. You know, like, go read something.
Okay.
And definitely that. I definitely feel as though what ends up happening is, again, as we were talking in the other room earlier, is that people have to begin to challenge themselves and getting out of their comfort zones and their comfort areas, because it's easy to tell somebody to read or research. But I'll give you an analogy, you know, that I've gone through. When it comes to religion, what is the history of your religion? With some people, they become very discomforted when you're saying, read about the history of your own religion, read about the history of your own self, so that way you can see how it was, how it is, and how it's going to be in the future. You have to know where you've been to know where you're going and know where you're going.
You found your thought.
I did find my thought.
She did. I saw her.
Oh man,
That light bulb went up.
yeah, no, kind of speaking to what you were speaking about the first time. I definitely agree with the idea of challenging young people, but I also think like listening to them and trusting them. You know, I certainly felt when I was younger, you know, and I had a lot of growing up and developing to do, and that's something that is, you know, obviously an ongoing process for all of us. But you know, I think that there's a lot of really like paternalistic kind of patronizing attitudes towards young people that's like, you don't know yet, you know, wait until you get out into the world. And like, that's true to an extent, you know, that's always there to an extent, but I really feel like I did know a lot, you know, and I feel like especially when it comes to the problems that are going to be plaguing our generation and the generations that come after us, these kids are already plugged in. They're already having these really, if you get on Tumblr and you like talk to 13-year-olds and like listen to the solutions that they have, whether it's like the small things that they're doing in their schools or in their communities, or the kids who are starting businesses and stuff, like there are kids out there with great big minds, and we need to just listen and just, you know, like help them advocate for themselves.
Okay, great. And that is a great place to take a break. We'll be right back with more from our millennial influencers. Hi, I'm Dr. Tyra Seldon, and welcome back to this episode of The Right On Show. And we have with us today millennial influencers. And this next question is one that deals with an issue that has basically been brought about because of millennial. And we're talking about the Take the Knee, which is in the news all over the place right now in relationship to Colin Kaepernick. One of the reasons I want to ask him about Colin Kaepernick is because he has made a decision that has ultimately had a ripple effect in terms of politics, society, as well as culture. So I'd like to start with you, Tony. So when you think about what Colin Kaepernick did, and many people will say that ultimately his decision to take a stand led to his losing his job and led to his, which is true, okay, which has led to his not having the same financial stability he had when he played in the NFL. To what extent do you think that bold of a move is predicated by the fact that he is a millennial?
Well, I think that a lot of millennials who are trying to find the platform to step up, and those that do have the platform to step up, a lot of them use it in that arena wisely. A lot of millennials like ourselves don't necessarily always try to do things by the rule book. So a lot of predecessors that may have came before Colin Kaepernick probably would have looked at Colin Kaepernick and Mike Vick and would have told him, you know, you don't want to do that. You know, you would lose your job. You would, you know, prevent yourself from a lot of opportunities. And I think that each millennial who has wanted to be a social activist to some degree has been told that you might want to be careful because you might put yourself at risk or be in danger. But the thing is with this generation is they can be very fearless. They have that capacity. And with Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, you know, that has now started a trend. That has now started a culture to start giving attention to the areas in the society that no one wants to talk about. You know, everyone kind of shunned Black Lives Matter when it would go to some of the political campaigns that Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton would have. And they even developed a strategy that has been leaked out, a strategy on how to deal with social activist groups that are trying to talk about race. And Colin Kaepernick is definitely staying within his rights and with his constitutional rights of protesting peacefully. And that's something that he has done, and that's something that he has exemplified as a leader. And I definitely think that that's something that's going to speak volumes for other millennials to now take that and go further with that.
And Mike? Elise?
Mike was like, I'm not ready.
Sit on that one.
Yeah, I think that what he's doing is really heroic, right? I think to kind of find yourself in a position where you have enough sort of celebrity and enough of a draw to have a voice that's meaningful and can stir up this big of a controversy. It's really horrible that it is a controversy, you know, but I think is a really great use of that kind of social capital, and I think it is very brave, right? Because it's very easy to kind of like get comfortable and then want to stay comfortable. You know, when speaking about the kind of impacts of millennialhood on that, you know, it's important to me to not erase, you know, like the folks who came before and also sacrifice, you know, whether it's, we're talking about like Muhammad Ali or other athletes or, you know, celebrities, actors, politicians, who kind of found themselves on a national platform and then used that to talk about racism or sexism or, you know, LGBTQ rights or whatever. You know, all of that historically always comes with a cost. And I think that, but I think that the impact of being a millennial, I think that the change there is kind of the things that we've been talking about as relates to social media and as relates to kind of our ability to build a community that is not limited by like physical constraints. You know, and sort of saying like, whereas in the past, actions like this may have been more localized to the community, the city, the neighborhood, the state where it was happening, where those conversations might only be had in smaller pockets where you're only having this conversation with your friends or your family or your community. Now these are conversations that we have the ability to have on a national level, not just only at like the high levels like in the press, but also on a civilian level, that I can, you know, get on Facebook and be talking about these protests with people all over the world. And what I think it does is opens up this opportunity that Kaepernick took to use his position to start a conversation. Now with millennials, it's a conversation that we can all carry along with him in a way that we maybe couldn't in the past.
Okay, excellent. Now you're in the hot seat.
Yeah. Y'all don't know these seats got flames on it. Yeah, so I was actually living in San Francisco last year when he did that, and the energy of the Bay in particular, I think definitely fed that. Like you said, millennials are definitely innovators, and a part of being an innovator, I think, is being disruptive. And what he did was definitely disruptive. Part of being disruptive, in my opinion, is being a little bit selfish, and really just saying, you know what, I don't care what the status quo is. I'm not necessarily going to think too much beyond my statement. And I'm very proud of Colin Kaepernick for the actions that he took after making that statement. I will say that I had never really thought about what him being a millennial may have had to do with that prior to you asking this question. As I was sitting here thinking about it, I think about Tebow as well. Both mediocre talent quarterbacks, but both used their platform to make a statement. I just don't, as far as Kaepernick's talent as a quarterback, I'm more so on the side of like, he's not one of the most talented quarterbacks in this nation. But what I will say is that as a millennial, what him and Tebow and many other people have done as far as saying, I'm going to bet on myself. I don't care what anybody else says about my talent, who I am, my how much I deserve to be here. I'm going to be me. I'm really proud of him for that, and I think that's something that a lot of people have drawn inspiration from, and I think that's something that a lot of millennials can use as an example of not only the ability that you have to make a statement, but also the responsibility that comes with making that statement to actually do something afterwards. Because Kaepernick didn't just take a knee, you know, like he stood behind that knee time and time again. And not only on the field, not only during the anthem, like my man's was active in the Bay. You know, like it wasn't just for the cameras. It was who he was. And he really thought about who he needed to be in order to actually take that action. So I would definitely say that for people to kind of like incubate and really understand who you are, and not only to just send out a tweet like hashtag take a knee, but or say I'm not gonna watch football, but then like the next day you're talking about who had the greatest play last night. You know, but like be that. Take that stand and be that monument on that situation that you've now set for yourself.
Excellent. So I think it's fair to say that each one of you is a dream catcher, right? So as dream catchers, where do you envision yourself 5 to 7 years from now? What does that life look like?
Does
that mean you want to go first?
I guess I don't have a choice. That's a very good question. I would say, you know, in 5 to 7 years, where I would want myself to be is definitely someone who is motivating the community to really push forward and look within themselves and be honest with themselves. There are a lot of times that people are not honest with themselves, so they can't save the world if they can't first internally save themselves. You see. So in 5 to 7 years, I will hope to be at a point to where I can help people have that internal look and begin to create a systematic approach to dealing with these issues. For example, a systematic approach for marriage. You know, begin to really go to the younger crowd and say, this is what marriage is. This is what you're thinking of. This is how what a union means, to be in union or to try to practice in union, and not to get complacent. Too many times people get complacent with after they've reached a certain point. You see, so.
Popcorn. I'll definitely catch this one. Because direction is something that I'm extremely concrete about. In 5 years, I see myself being a proprietor of progress. Like, period. I'm really firm in who I am today. You know, I took a stand to do this. I left Indiana University during my senior year to join the military, just based on the fact that I felt like that service was something I needed to gain leadership and discipline in order to run a business. Now I've been off active duty for 3 years, running 3 businesses successfully, you know, hitting the numbers that most people aspire to hit, but they're not the numbers that I want to hit because I want to help others do that. You know, it's not about me, it's about kind of what monument that I want to make out of my life, and I want to further this by allowing other people to do that for themselves as well. Really kind of identify that self-direction, that, okay, what do you care about? What are you about? And then give them the tools and resources to actually live that life that's fulfilling. You know, like fill up that cup that you've now molded for yourself. So actually in a couple weeks in San Francisco, I have a condo there, and I'm bringing residents in, starting up a fellowship program for a program called the Elite Coalition, and we're really looking to like bring people out, you know, give them an experience, show them a vibe of all we're going to talk about is who you want to be and what you want to do. Like, that's it. You don't need a certification. You don't need somebody to qualify you. No one qualified Kaepernick to take a knee. You know, no one qualifies you to take a stand. And so just kind of equipping people with the confidence and the tools and the connections, very similar to like what's going on here. You know, just really allowing people to confidently proceed towards who they want to be.
Thank you.
It's hard to say, 10 years ago, if you told me that I was going to be, interested in working in, like either organizing or, policy or politics at all, I would have looked at you crazy because looking back, I guess that has always been kind of an underlying theme of my interest, but it's, it's helping people, right? It's trying to make the world better in whatever ways are accessible to me to do that. And so, I think I've gotten some more direction over these last few years, but it could be influencing policy, it could be teaching and educating, it could be some of both, and doing like an adjunct faculty gig. It could be speaking. I don't really know, but finding opportunities to try to help communities as they seek to develop themselves and influence kind of these conversations around best practices in policy and organizing are really interesting to me. So something in that realm.
Okay. I expect great things from all three of you. So no pressure, right?
Wow. You too, Tyra.
Right. Way high.
Now this is what we think.
Right. I got this.
Yeah.
Not generation. But no, seriously, one question I ask every single guest, because we do have younger people who watch this show, and I think that when you have a platform, you have a responsibility. So my question to each of you is, what is the best advice, or some of the best advice that you ever received that you would then like to pass on to someone who may be watching this?
For me, it's actually from someone that I've never met.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm a really strong promoter of reading. And
thank you, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just a little biased when it comes to that.
Look, the Right On show.
Right.
No, but Earl Nightingale, Napoleon Hill, these are very strong mentors for me.
Okay.
And I incubated for years where I didn't listen to music for 2 years.
Okay. Wow.
I just didn't want to be influenced, and I wanted to kind of gain influence from a different source.
Okay.
And there's a statement that you become what you think about.
Yes.
And I've kind of taken that to go further and add that millennial spin, that immediacy spin of it, that you are and you will become what you think about. Because literally what you're thinking about right now, you're not capable of doing anything higher than that. And so just to stay in an elevated conscious thought and consistently aspire to raise that bar. That's what that means to me. So you become what you think about, so guard your thoughts.
Excellent. I'll just go.
I would say the best advice that I have gotten, and I've gotten a lot of inspirational advice just throughout the years, especially in my journey, but the best advice I would say has come from two places. The first place I would say is my mother. Second place I would say is Louis Farrakhan. The first place, my mother, a lot of times I would have certain difficulties, and she would tell me, son, if you just make it through the night, tomorrow will be a brighter day, a better day. And going after Louis Farrakhan, he had said, after difficulty comes ease. What that means for me is that wherever you want to go, whatever you want to do in life, it is possible. You can do it. But there's a night journey that each and every one of us is going to have to go through before we reach our destination. There's going to be a period of darkness where you feel like you're all alone. You see, and sometimes when people reach that stage, they lose sight that they are really just arm's reach from their goal. They're really just almost there. But now this is they come to a point to where it really tests their character, where it really tests and shows or bears witness to their development as a person. So I would say those two things are things that I always keep in the back of my mind, and especially trying to be one in a community that tries to push the culture, that tries to advance the culture, that tries to now make things systematic, that tries to get people to the next level and change their thinking, and not think inside the box, but think outside of the box, and then expand.
I'd say, you know, not to limit yourself to what exists or to what you can see. You know, that there are not all of the roles that we're going to need to fill in this world don't necessarily exist yet. You know, that kind of touching back on what I said at the beginning. You know, I think millennials are engineers. I think we're creators. I think we're building new worlds, and so don't waste a lot of time looking for a place to fit in. Just kind of be aggressively and unapologetically yourself, and you will either find the place that you fit, or you will create a space for yourself where maybe nobody's been before, or maybe it has been somebody who didn't look like you know, who was a different race or a different gender, and there have been these gatekeepers, but just like keep on doing what is true and authentic and real to you and to kind of who you are. And I think that you know, if I wasted so many years trying to be the kind of person I thought other people might like, you know, and I think, or find a place to fit in the social structure. And I think it was kind of off-putting probably because it wasn't authentic. I wasn't really being me, and it certainly didn't feel good to me because either I was still rejected because people were like, what's happening here? Or even if I was, then I wasn't being accepted for myself, for who I actually am, you know? So if you refuse to compromise on that, and if you say, you know, I'm gonna be me no matter how challenging, no matter how painful, after difficulty comes ease, right? Like you get better at being yourself, and you get more comfortable being in the world. And I think once you're comfortable is when you can be successful and impactful.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thank you so much. I mean, I feel inspired and motivated. I know there are people who are viewing this who feel the same. So how can they follow you? How can they stay in contact? What social media platforms are you on? And let's just shout them out.
So www.mikepirtle.com. That's M-I-K-E, P as in Papa, I-R-T as in Tango, L-E.com. On Instagram it's Serial CEO, not like the kind you eat, like serial number. CEO, and I respond to everybody. I'm on everything. I'm not a robot online, so like holla at me. And I also have a newsletter, so you guys can find that on my website as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
People can find me on Facebook under Tony Wilburn, TonyWilbern. People always mistake it. Or you can find me on Instagram under Clyde Cranes, ClydeCranes.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook at Elise Whitaker, ELISEWHITAKER. I may not accept your friend request if you're a stranger, but like, feel free to message me, and I'll be happy to respond. You can follow me. All my posts are public, you know. But or I'm on Twitter at Elise_Whitaker, or Instagram at Practically an Avenger.
Okay. And there's a cute story behind it. Can you tell them that story?
Yeah, so Kate Bishop is the female Hawkeye in Marvel Comics, and she's just really great. I really like Hawkeye Comics, which is its own little story, but so she often gets excluded. Like whenever Hawkeye is not always included in the Avengers in the first place, but even when a Hawkeye is, it's always Clint Barton. It's the male Hawkeye, and so whenever she's in her comics doing her own thing, you know, and people need help, she's like, well, I can handle this. I'm practically an Avenger, or you know, I'm pretty much an Avenger, and I just think that that's really adorable. And I liked the kind of like, you know, I could help you out with this. I'm competent. I'm capable. I'm ready to plug in. Other people might not see it, but I'm ready.
You see it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just love that story, so I wanted you all to hear that.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this, and so would you guys be willing to come back?
Absolutely.
Can we do a part 2?
Yeah, we're the Avengers.
I love it.
Wow.
I love it.
What a great day.
I love it.
Oh man, you made my night.
I love it. So for those of you you who have been watching our show. We are so thankful that you are part of our journey this evening. And again, I want to thank Mike, Tony, and Elise for being my guests. They've given us so much food for thought, and I hope that as you hear their stories and you hear the work that they're doing, you're inspired to go out and do the same in your community. If you're interested in being a guest on The Right On Show, please email us at therightonShow@gmail.com, therightonShow@gmail.com. We're also interested in those of you who may want to be corporate sponsors for the show. And lastly, we want to let you know that we're going to start doing shows on location. So if you'd like for us to come to your city or your college campus, again, email us at therightonShow@gmail.com. Until we meet again, I'm Dr. Tyra Seldon, and right on.